Hi everyone, I'm Any New Province, and this week we're going to find out if Canker Abomination is possibly Pauper playable. Ultimate Masters is finally legal for play on Magic Online, which means all of the sweet downshifts that came with it for the Pauper format can now be tried out. For our first week in this new format, we're trying to power out the enormous threat that is Canker Abomination on turn 2 before our opponent has a chance to commit any creatures of their own. Canker Abomination costs 2 generic and 2 hybrid Golgari mana. It's a 6/6, but it enters the battlefield with a -1/-1 counter on it for each creature that target opponent controls. I wanted to build a deck that focused on Canker Abomination entering the battlefield with as few -1/-1 counters as possible, and that's how I arrived at this deck, Quick Canker. Before I get into the deck tech, I just want to let you know that you can like the video or subscribe to the channel down below. I'd seriously appreciate it. It's a great way to let me know you've enjoyed everything, and it really encourages me to keep making great Pauper content. Alright, let's have a look at Quick Canker. While having a 6/6 on board as early as turn 2 should close out most games for us, we might need another finisher if the games go later. That's why I've included 3 copies of the Germfather as an auxiliary finisher. Gurmag Angler costs 6 generic and a black mana for a 5/5 with Delve, which means each card you exile from your graveyard while casting the spell pays for 1 generic mana. Because of how some of the other spells in our deck work, we should be guaranteed a Gurmag Angler on turn 3 if our turn 2 Canker Abomination plan doesn't work out. The way we're ramping out Canker Abomination on turn 2 starts with Arbor Elf. It costs 1 green mana for a 1/1 that you can tap to untap target forest. Ideally, the forest that Arbor Elf is untapping is enchanted with Utopia Sprawl, which costs 1 green mana to enchant a forest, and when it enters the battlefield, you choose a color. Whenever the enchanted forest is tapped for mana, its controller adds an additional 1 mana of the chosen color. So, turn 1, you play a forest, cast your Arbor Elf. On turn 2, you play another untapped green source, cast Utopia Sprawl on your untapped forest, tap it for 2 mana, untap it with your Arbor Elf, tap it for 2 more mana, and cast a 6/6. We're also running 2 copies of Gift of Paradise, which helps fix our mana for some of the black mana hungry spells in our deck, but also it just provides us a ton of mana if we want to cast a lot of spells in a single turn later in the game. Gift of Paradise costs 2 generic mana and 1 green mana for an enchantment aura that enchants a land. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 3 life. Also, the enchanted land has tap, add 2 mana of any color to your mana pool. If getting Canker Abomination down on turn 2 didn't work out and we're a little light on Gurmag Anglers, I've included a ton of Wraths in this deck to make sure our opponent has no creatures around when we do draw our Canker Abomination. Our first Wrath is Crypt Rats. It costs 2 and a black for a 1/1 rat that allows you to pay X black mana to deal X damage to each creature and each player. While Crypt Rats will usually get the job done killing all of our opponent's creatures, I've also included 2 copies of Evenkar's Justice to come down a little bit early if there's too much pressure on the other side of the battlefield. Evenkar's Justice costs 2 black for a sorcery with buyback 5, which means you may pay an additional 5 generic mana as you cast Evenkar's Justice. If you do, put this card back into your hand as it resolves. Evenkar's Justice deals 2 damage to each creature and each player. While we will be wrathing the board pretty consistently with our 5 main board wraths, I've included some other situational removal to deal with specific creatures the wraths may not be able to deal with. First, we have 2 copies of Disfigure. It costs 1 black mana for an instant to give target creature -2/-2 until end of turn. Disfigure is great when you're playing up against fairies or if you have to kill a ninja before it gets too much value for your opponent. We're also running 2 copies of Chainer's Edict, which costs 1 and a black for a sorcery that causes target player to sacrifice a creature. You can cast it again out of your graveyard by paying its flashback cost of 5 generic mana, 2 black mana. Once we've wiped the board, an Edict effect is very good for picking up any creatures that are too large for our wraths like Crypt Rats and Evenkar's Justice. Also, we're generating so much mana that we'll be able to cast Evenkar's Justice twice in a single turn early on. Next up, we're running some specific 4-drops that we can ramp into on turn 2 if we haven't found a Canker Abomination. The first turn 2 4-drop we'd love to cast is Thorn of the Black Rose. Thorn of the Black Rose costs 3 and a black for a 1/3 human assassin with Death Touch, and when it enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch. Being the Monarch means you draw an extra card at the end of each of your end steps, which sounds pretty sweet, but if someone who isn't the monarch deals combat damage to you, they become the monarch, so it's a bit dangerous. We're also running a single copy of Penumbra Spider because it's so good at shutting down flyers. Penumbra Spider costs 2 green for a spider with reach. It's also a 2/4, but the best part about Penumbra Spider is when it dies, you create a token that's a 2/4 black spider creature token with reach. Part of getting down an early Gurmag Angler means stocking your bin, and the first piece of our card filtering does just that for us while finding a Gurmag Angler. It's Commune with the Gods. It costs 1 and a green for a sorcery that allows you to reveal the top 5 cards of your library. You may put a creature or enchantment card from among them into your hand, put the rest into your graveyard. To go along with the card selection of Commune with the Gods, we have some raw card advantage in Night's Whisper. It costs 1 and a black for a sorcery and allows you to draw 2 cards and lose 2 life. Finally, our last non-land card is Pulse of Murasa. It costs 2 generic mana and a green mana for an instant that returns target creature or land card from a graveyard to its owner's hand. It gains you 6 life. Because Crypt Rats, Evenkar's Justice, and Night's Whisper are going to be dealing damage to us throughout the game, we're going to have to buffer our life total. Pulse of Murasa does just that while buying back one of our huge Canker Abominations or Gurmag Anglers so that our opponent has to deal with it again. Alright, let's have a look at this mana base, starting with our non-basics. First, we have some copies of Ash Barrens for going and finding our basic lands early in the game. We have 2 copies of Bajuka Bog as some main deck graveyard hate, and we have 3 copies of Jungle Hollow, your standard Pauper duels in green and black. These are going to help us buffer our life total a little bit as well. For our basics, we have a whopping 9 forests and 3 swamps. We're running this many forests so that we can get enough untapped green mana sources to cast a Canker Abomination on turn 2. Alright, let's have a look at this sideboard. First, we have 2 copies of Doomblade, just pretty good, almost unconditional removal for any threat. We have 2 copies of Shrivel to have more Wraths against X1s, and we have 2 copies of Claws of Wirewood for more Wraths against Core Skyfisher. We have a single copy of Serene Heart for dealing with Boggles, 2 copies of Pulse of Murasa for gaining more life against Burn, 2 copies of Nihil Spellbomb to control the graveyard of control decks, another copy of Penumbra Spider to reach up and grab those fairies, another copy of Thorn of the Black Rose for slower decks, and 2 copies of Duress to fight counter spells or potentially a combo. And there you have it, quick Canker. We're going to be taking this deck into a league at twitch.tv/AnyNewProvince this Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Atlantic time. We're there every Tuesday night playing possibly Pauper playable decks. Before I go, I just want to remind you that you can like the video or subscribe to the channel down below. I'd seriously appreciate it. It's a great way to let me know you've enjoyed everything, and it really encourages me to keep making great Pauper content. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this deck tech, and hopefully I'll see you on Tuesday night.